Good morning, grade 11, and welcome back to a new lecture of the distance learning about the same piece of poetry, Aunt Julia by Norma McKay. Today I'm going to start the analysis of this poem. I divided it into two parts, part 1 and part 2, because it's somehow long and I wanted to ease it up to you. And I will simplify the most important points to be used in the analytical essay. As I said before, you have to divide your analytical essay into three parts: the introduction, to write something about the background of the poet and also the era of this poet, and if you have a piece of information or the question, I ask you just like analyze Aunt Julia about the barrier that Norma McKay faced or confronted while communicating with her in her life. So you will mention this piece of information in the introduction to talk about it in details in the main part or the body of this. In the body you will write everything about the figures of speech and the techniques you already found or figured out in the poem. And you write everything about the themes, the form or structure, things like that, mentioning the summary in a functional way in the main part of the body. In the final part, the conclusion, you will apply his style, for example, or the total analysis of the poem to his era or to what was common or popular in his era. If he added something important to literature at that time or not. As I said, also you will mention if his personal life affected his work or not. So we have some important elements to mention in writing the analytical essay. Today, inshallah, we are going to go over or cover the analysis part 1 of Aunt Julia by Norma McKay. But before this, you will listen to the poem. Not all of the poem, but just stanza 1 and stanza 2. Listen, please.
Aunt Julia spoke Gaelic, very loud and very fast. I could not answer her. I could not understand her.
Okay, this is the first stanza, and in the first stanza we are introduced to the main character of the poem, Aunt Julia. In this stanza, Norma McKay introduced to us that the main character here in this poem is Aunt Julia, and he's going to talk about her in details, maybe something about her description, maybe something about her communication with him. The first stanza is just like an introduction of the main character of this poem. We are told that she speaks Gaelic. This immediately tells us there is a communication barrier. It means that there is a trouble here in their communication together, the communication between Norma McKay and his Aunt Julia. The language, of course, was very difficult to him to understand. He was speaking English, but his aunt was speaking Gaelic, so there was a great trouble or communication barrier between both of them. He used the two lines that I could not answer her and I could not understand her. This for me also has connotations of death. I could not answer her shows his desperation and grief, and also shows us that McKay perhaps feels guilty about his relationship with his aunt, that he never really understood her and never will understand her. So in this stanza, Norma McKay shows us that he felt guilty, he felt very sad. He accused himself of this gap or the communication barrier between him and his aunt, because he couldn't learn the Gaelic language and she couldn't learn the English language. There was a great communication barrier between both of them. It was and he felt guilty around that. In stanza 2, listen to stanza 2 first, and after that I'm going to explain it or analyze it in details.
She wore men's boots when she wore any. I can see her strong foot stained with peat, paddling the treadle of the spinning wheel, while her right hand drew yarn marvellously out of the air.
Great. In the second stanza, I see his aunt, a strong woman, a very strong woman, because she's very hardworking. I think she's responsible for everything in her craft. So I see her a very responsible woman, and also a very strong woman. So in stanza 2, the opening lines are: she wore men's boots when she wore any. It means that sometimes she wore men's boots, but almost of her time she didn't wear anything. This shows that she is perhaps a very tough woman who almost takes on a man's role. It means that she is a very responsible woman, a very strong woman as a man. I can see her strong foot stained with peat. This reveals that the character is a woman of the land, paddling with the treadle of the spinning wheel while her right hand drew on marvelously out of the air. This shows a more domesticated side to Aunt Julia. This is a skill heavily side to Aunt Julia. Here he shows how strong his aunt is, and how responsible his aunt is. She's responsible for everything in her craft like a man. She is a very hard-working woman. This is a skill heavily associated with island life. Harris is famous for producing tweed. The word choice of marvelously shows the young McCaig's admiration and fondness for his aunt. So he admired his aunt very much for being very strong, hard-working and responsible. She never complains, but she's always working without even saying a complaint. The use of the present tense throughout this stanza creates a sense of immediacy. Immediacy means she continued doing this all the time, and shows how vividly and readily he can still access these memories. That's all for today.